like our entire society has become a hypocrisy, an inverse, an invert, you know. And that's when we talk about all of it. Yeah, it's just like it in school we had a on Tuesdays it was opposite day. I always said that was the only day the world felt normal.
Yeah, man. Yeah. Oh no, it is. It's demiurgic. There are 7 heavenly gradations and 7 lower gradations that descend forth from the demiurge. Again, it sometimes takes different forms within different traditions all over the world. Sometimes there's 9 gradations, sometimes there's 8. Again, it's patterned on the spine primarily. All of the various numbers are found within the spine and the subdivisions of the spine, and the subdivisions of the vertebra and the categorizations of them. Again, all the way to the skull, right? So the dome, if you will. And what enlightenment is, to trace back from the point of death, which is birth into this material prison, to trace back up this quote quote spine, if you will, or the pillar of earth, and then thus to ascend your spirit back to its sort of home or its initial state, through the astral and causal plane. There's various traditions and allegories surrounding it, but weirdly enough, the sort of, the gate to Eden, guarded by that cherubim is Saturn. That's the final one. It's the 7th gradation. Saturn is the sort of evil one. It's an arrogant. It's very arrogant. It's full of itself. It's boastful. It's very close to the demiurge. And strangely enough, that individual obviously exhibited all of those characteristics. It's like he was an archetype, like a gatekeeper. That next step of knowledge. It's very strange. And I was looking at some of the other emanations, and of course they're attributed to emotions, generalities of state, and for example, the passions, lusts, are Venus. But each archetype as well also has a certain emotion attached to it, or a description of its state. So it could be arrogance, instability, evilness, deceptiveness, shrewdness, or things such as that. So yeah, very strange. I was looking at all of these 7 gradations, and I've come across each one of the archetypes leading me to this point, and it's very peculiar. And each archetype has shown me more of the illusion. As it's almost like Atlantis. You're traveling up the canal and you're going through each ring, to get to the center of the truth, where the truth dwells in the temple. So, yeah, you're absolutely correct. It's a demiurgic world. It's totally inverted. He brought out that point as well. I thought it was fantastic, actually. I never thought of it this way, but our mind actually has to process the world. Well, turn it the wrong way up, if you will. It's all inverted. The world is upside down. That's how we initially see it. Our mind actually flips it, the sort of wrong way up, if you will. So our mind either produces the illusion as well, or helps to produce the illusion of this world, or it is tricked into doing so, as we are, as our self is, in many ways. So it just shows you again, if that's true, it just shows you we live in an inverted world from its sort of Genesis state. We're in upside down world, and nobody sees it. They see the illusion. They think that we're in, we're in a place that's everything's swell. It's fine, and it's all it's meant to be like this. It's profound when you think of it like a prison. That this is like an illusory world, a fear tear, a tearing of by fear. So it opens up so much in terms of thinking. As you can probably tell on the Gilded, I've been writing just constantly. Just things are just just see once you sort of see this, you cross that Rubicon. You begin to connect things that otherwise seemed in your mind unconnected, and you begin to see the entire holistic picture of the prosonic illusory system that we have been embroiled in, and you understand as well, and begin to let go of the care for it. That you care for souls, you don't care for the world. Matter is transitory, of course. The soul is eternal. They were sort of disparate. You connect them all. It's quite amazing. It shows you that you've got to truth, or you're getting very close to the truth, to the heart. You're relighting the beacon of the spirit. It shows you're getting close to that point when you're just being sort of flooded. You're not even speaking half the time or writing. It's something else is writing through you. It's like you've awoken something within you, and thoughts just come to you rather than you attempting to conjure the thought. The thought itself is conjuring the action within you, rather than vice versa. So it's, again, you could call it inspiration, you could call it a sort of epiphany, you could call it becoming one with God. I don't know. But yeah, I was listening to Secret Teachings of All Ages yesterday, just with all of this in mind and such. I've listened to that book maybe 5 times prior. I mean, all the way through. It's an audiobook. It's one of my favourite ones to listen to work because it lasts 3 or 4 shifts. Exactly. So it gets me through the week. And I was listening to it with that in mind. And the way I was seeing things prior, without this explication of it all, of the illusion, it made sense, the Secret Teachings of All Ages, but I was seeing it in a distorted manner. And parts of it made sense, but it didn't make sense holistically. All of the parts were disparate. All of my understanding of them was disparate. When I read this now, or listen to it rather, it just all ties in. The whole thing. I can actually, Manly P. Hall, I can actually see everything that he's talking about. I can see right through the allegory. I can see it all. The whole thing. Everything he's talking about. For example, I keep re-listening to that part where it's Hermes Trismegistus, his vision of Poimandres, or Poimandres comes to him as a great dragon, the lord of the earth. Poimandres, I forget the etymology of it now. God, it'll come back to me. I've written it down somewhere in my notes. It means man shepherd, or the shepherd of man. Again, suffering is the shepherd of the soul. It allows the soul to elevate itself, to elevate its state, its imprisoned state within this world. It goes all the way back to a Kemetic or ancient Egyptian etymology, Paiminintare, which literally means the knowledge of Re, or the understanding of Re. Now, there are 3 aspects of the sun. It depends upon the time period of Egypt, or ancient Egypt, of Kemet, in terms of what we're looking at. But primarily there are 3 aspects. You have Ra, or Ra Horus, or Ra Horakti, the 2 horizons, right? The synthesis of the dualism, if you will. The initial point, right? Again, the rays emanating forth from the sun. They emanate from that single point. We then look at Aten, which is the visible nature of the sun, and Amun, which is the hidden nature, Amun literally means the hidden one. If you've played Assassin's Creed Origins, the hidden ones are named after Amun, right? So you find with the Hyksos period, so the second Hyksos period, with Akhenaten, whose mother, was an Asiatic. She was Hyksos. Again, the Hyksos means the shepherd kings, right? Or the kings of the shepherd, the kings that were put in place by the shepherd, by the demiurge. They, in essence, went to war with Amun. They destroyed or defaced any inscription that contained Amun. And in time when the Atenists were kicked out, that's the reason for the Exodus story within the Bible. We had the same thing done to the Atenist inscriptions and the inscriptions of Akhenaten, his prophet, or in modern parlance, his Messiah or Mashiach. All of his inscriptions were destroyed as well by the people who were adherents of Amunism, right? Again, within Revelation 3:14, we see, and with Jesus in general, we see a stark difference. Within John 8, we see that real stark characteristic difference between the Christ or the Christos, right? The Amun or Amen, right? Within Revelation 3:14, Jesus literally talks about himself, or Christ talks about himself in the third person as the Amen, right? Amen is not the demiurge, right? You could think of the Amen as, again, like the Christos, the Saviour, which is the mind, right? It's that thing which has an instinct of curiosity, and it has the ability to see things that are hidden, to have faith. And faith is the belief or knowledge or inherent knowing of things that are unseen, right? Again, within the New Testament, Jesus uses the analogy of the wind. He asks, where does the wind stem from? Where's its originating point? You don't know. No one knows. Yet we can feel the wind, but we can't see it. It's hidden from our view. But we know it's there by its effect upon the world and its effect upon us. So, Atonism is immoral. It's nihilistic. You have within John 8 as well, let him who is without sin cast the first stone, right? Provides the stark difference between demiurgic morality, which you find in the Old Testament, and in general, I speak in general, New Testament morality, right? Or the morality that's inbuilt within the good, the supreme good of the system, that which is the originating point of everything. Again, the single point that emanates forth the light onto the rest of existence, right? It provides existence through its being. So you can see there that the stark difference between the two. Obviously, Ra, or Ra Horakti, is that singular point that brought everything into existence by its inherent being. So from that singular point was emanated forth the ray, or, the Ra. And it is both the past and the present, the Alpha and the Omega. The I Am was in the beginning and the I Am will be in the end. Again, that goes to the Vedic tradition, the I Om, right? Om, when they're meditating. That is in essence the Trinity within the Vedic tradition. You have Brahma, creation, Vishnu, preservation of said existence or creation in this case, and Shiva, again, he who has the shin-shaped trident, or the Trishula, the destroyer, essentially, the destroyer of the world, the demiurge, if you will, the destroyer of the world, the demiurge. But each part of that trinity works as a negative feedback loop. It works as a thesis, antithesis, synthesis. It works as a triadic circle, right? A holistic system of self-preservation. So, in a similar manner, we too have to mirror that if we desire fulfillment, peace, and again, if you believe it literally, an actual ascension to the heavenly realm and the cessation of suffering, pain, and the energetic fluctuations that exist within this suspension of the soul within the physical world. But the great dragon comes to him, gives him a vision of the world and how the world works. And obviously, Hermes Trismegistus was deceived by the dragon because the dragon states that he is the supreme being, the god of gods, the god among all other gods. That's not the case. It's obviously this is the demiurge. That's another part of the illusion. So, strangely enough, it seems Hermes in his vision didn't actually see the entirety of the illusion. He just saw what Poimandres wanted him to see. He sort of stopped Hermes dead in his tracks by that deception of, Poimandres or the demiurge stating, well, the buck stops with me, Hermes, there's nothing beyond me. And then at the end of the vision, obviously Hermes throws accolades, he prostrates himself before the great dragon, obviously not understanding that he's merely the demiurge, which is the lowest form of immaterial existence. In contrast, God is that which is higher, that which, was the genesis point of all heavenly and material existence, was being, was God, right? So it was the spark of being. Not in a literal sense, of course. It's the spark as a demiurgic symbol, but it was that initial thought, if you will. Amazing when you see it like this. And the weird thing is, just really quickly, in regards to the individual in question, he states that the demiurge is evil. He seems very resolute in that. Now again, yes, he is evil. Obviously, he's the antithesis of good, certainly, yes. But the thing is, when you think about it, because good, or God, or the initial being, the initial thought, because that which is good produced evil, right? The alpha produced the omega, then through the circularity of the universe, good thus begets evil and evil begets good. So both are necessary within the pendulum of life, right? Within each swing, each successive swing, the reciprocal opposite is thus birthed. And if the demiurge's world is evil, then to allow the evil to destroy itself and thus leave behind that which it consumed, which is the good, the seed of both existence, creation, and evil, then it leaves behind that potentiality. From it can we thus rebuild not the material world, but our spiritual world, our inward world. Digressing. And through this reciprocity is the eternality of life thus continued ad infinitum, right? This peculiar thing of life, which really is being and existence put into one. It's the mind and the spirit combined. But yeah, there's so much truth to this. For him to say this is all boring, unless he is the initial being, the initial thought, unless he is God, none of this can be boring. I mean, this is so exhilarating. In fact, I've never felt as alive as I have now. It seems like the further you get up into the center of truth, of true knowledge of the divine reality of everything, the more alive you feel, the more the scope of everything that you're seeing. The vantage point from which you're standing upon. You're seeing, oh my God, the amount of things that I didn't know. And there's still much more that I need to know.
You said that. I tried to quote you. it was somewhere in like general chat, spirituality and gnosis or something about like the more you learn and know, the more you realize you don't know like anything at all. It's like there's so much more.
The greater the circle of knowledge, right? The bigger the scope of the unknown that exists external to it. So the more you know, the more you realize you don't know anything. Do you know what I mean? Or the more you realize there's so much unknowns that you have to keep expanding the boundary of your dominion of knowledge, because because we're born with an instinct of curiosity. I think that is actually our sort of our life jacket. It's our life jacket within this world. The curiosity, though within the Garden of Eden story, that's what brought us to the fall, according to the story. I actually have to say, without curiosity, I don't think we could escape this material prison. I think we need curiosity. And within Sanskrit, we find that Christ potentially could be a composite word of ish and create, right? Create is the author, if you will, to author something. And furthermore, ish is probably the etymological root of ash or ashura, right? Or the ashuras, the wrathful or destructive demons, right, of the Vedic and Hindu and Buddhist traditions, right? So Christ is the author of destruction. Destruction of what? Destruction of that which inevitably will lead to destruction, right? He destroys the falsehood. He destroys the lies. He thus elevates the truth. He exposes the light that is surrounded by darkness. He destroys the darkness and thus brings forth the light. So curiosity is a destructive principle. But it is a destructive principle to the principle of destruction. The Christ is thus the universal mind, or our mind, which unlocks. It is the key to the heart, and the unlocking, or kickstarting of the heart. That which would be analogous with the spirit, if you will. Though they say curiosity killed the cat, well, listen, all cats die, so, might as well be curious.
No, I do. I understand everything you've been saying. I feel like I hit the the point you're hitting like sometime last year. Like I think when you started this group, when there was like the Discord purge. Yeah, because that was took me a while to kind of break the bonds with like the Christians. Um, I mean, not that I think the Christian path, at least, a lot of them are good, you know. So are all the roads, paved to hell. So, which to me means a whole bunch of different things as far as hell and Helheim and the light, and Lucifer and cherubim in the garden, and just thinking about like the Garden of Eden. Like, do you think it really was that wonderful? Because like that's what I think about is like that movie Pleasantville I brought up the other day, where it's like, all right, you live in perfect harmony in this quintessence of life in this beautiful garden with you can eat of every tree and hang out, and it's, these we'll say, if, as far as we know, there was at least some spirits of sorts, uh, call it Satan or the snake and some other things, and I would assume all the animals were there if they were brought to Adam for naming it. You have a couple pairs of everything, like Noah's Ark, essentially, right? uh what do? You don't even have to eat. That was the thing where it's like you can eat of every tree except for, this specific one that believes the tree of good and evil or the tree of knowledge or I think it was the tree of good and evil, right? That's what the one you're not supposed to eat of, that Adam wasn't supposed to eat of. Good and evil. That just where you'll trick, or yeah, you'll become like God. That's why he doesn't want you to do it. For surely you won't die.
Yeah, you can eat of the tree of life, but you can't eat of the tree of good and evil, and also life as well. Um, so again, why wouldn't you want to? Why wouldn't you want the Adam and Eve for that matter to eat of the knowledge of the tree of good and evil? Well, it's because if they did, they could see through the illusion of the duality of that which was formed from the void by the demiurge, right? So, as well, the reason in Genesis 3:22 to 24 he did not seek for them as well to eat of the tree of life too, or to continue eating of the tree of life after they had learned of the illusory nature of this world, of this creation, this prison of this torturous prison, if you will, is because they would then they'd be equal to the demiurge. They would have synthesized the dualism into life, which is the middle way, if you will. And also as well, we have this understanding, again, we're getting into territory where we're actually looking at this not as literal, but as an allegory, right? Genesis 3:9, right? Or pardon me, Genesis 3:8 to 9. I'll just read this quickly. Then the man and his wife, or Adam and Eve, heard the voice of the Lord God walking in the garden in the breeze of the day, and they hid themselves from the presence of the Lord God among the trees of the garden. But the Lord God called out to man, "Where are you?" Or "Where art thou?" It's basically the same thing in Geneva Bible. The Lord God called out, "Where are you?" Why would something that's omniscient call out, "Where are you?" He should already know where he is. So what we're seeing here is this potentially what we're seeing throughout the Bible. This is the demiurgic force. Now again, remember, Genesis is an Old Testament book, right? And also recall as well, Genesis actually derives from the same word as genetics, right, or genes, which comes from a Greek word, genos, right, which literally means to be a descendant, or in a very archaic sense, to descend, right? What does it mean by to descend? Well, to descend into this torturous prison, to descend through the seven heavenly emanations, to take on the fracturing of the soul, which becomes the mind, then to take on the physical vessel, this vessel of sacrifice that is designed to harvest our suffering, to harvest our energy, for the perpetuation of this cycle, this eternal, persistent world, of the persistent universe, rather, and of the persistence of all existence, that which comes forth from not that which is eternal, comes forth from that which is not eternal. It just is. It's not even within the bounds of time. It comes forth from that which is, one could say, God, right? The true God, the true heavenly root of everything, not the demiurge, which is the Lord. The God of the Old Testament within the Gnostic understanding, I mean, even outside of Gnosticism, is generally considered within the mysteries that the God of the Old Testament is the demiurge. I mean, his characteristics, he's seen within Psalm 18 as a dragon. We even have further confirmation of that within Job 41, where he verbatim, what is contained within Psalm 18 is also mirrored within the description of Leviathan in Job 41. So therefore, he is the dragon. He's the great dragon. Again, Poimandaries also goes by Yaldabaoth. within the Gnostic tradition, or literally the begetter of the void, right? It's like what I posted some time ago. It was that old stop motion Mark Twain and I forget what it's called now. I saw that on that Pink Elephant's channel. That is the angel of the void, the demiurge, right? And I think what we're seeing with that Garden of Eden, he doesn't want them to eat of knowledge and of the tree of life, because to do so would mean that firstly they understand the knowledge of good and evil, or the knowledge of the duality, the knowledge of the illusion that they were in, right? With the tree of life, if they were to also eat from that, they would also attain life, not existence, not eternal life within this existence, but they would understand from whence they came, right? So they would understand the synthesis. Again, it's like the apple breaking apart in two, as you see with an iPet goat, and from it is a lotus, right? Is the synthesis. So from the bog of duality is thus birthed the lotus. It's the same thing within the Orphic egg, really. That this idea that through the duality, through the suffering, is birthed, or is the potential to be birthed. The spirit, the fire, the vital essence rekindled anew. Again, most of the Gnostics saw the Christ figure, the nous, as they called him, the mind, right? They saw that as the savior, that your mind is the savior of your saving grace from the demiurge. Some of them even say that the nous was actually the serpent. Some of them, the Ophites, if I recall correctly, I think stated that he was the. I want to get this correctly. He was the son of the demiurge. Yet, when you think about it, that because the demiurge is the lowest point of immaterial existence, the thing that he produced was the mind. The mind is the fractured nature of the entirety of the spirit. So the demiurge has no cosmic jurisdiction, if you will, over the entirety of the spirit, because he is the lowest emanation of it. But he can control it in parts if he breaks everything down into like a hall of mirrors, into altars, into archetypes, into a summation of the spirit which is subdivided down. Again, because the mind is filled with the spirit is naturally higher than the demiurge. Therefore, it becomes curious of the shackles that it's in. It becomes curious of the sepulchre or the tomb that's within. It becomes curious of the world, of the illusory world. If you can cultivate the spirit, if you can cultivate it, if you can bring it from through the mind, I think it's something to do with that. But again, there's many different traditions with this within Gnosticism. It's not just one tradition. There's many different lines of thought on it. But generally, the Christos is the nous. It's the mind. And you have to prostrate the mind on the horizontal axis, which is the material world, and you have to prostrate it along the vertical axis, which is obviously heaven. Again, you have to combine heaven and earth. The intersection point between them is that point of salvation. It's that point where we came from. It's like, think of the cross as like a spiritual triangulation, right? And the point between the two is the Christos, right? It's the fifth point. It's the unifying point, the spirit. It's also a bird's eye view of a pyramid, if you look at it in such a manner. And through the suffering, do you die to your old self? Do you die to this fleshly prison? And are you thus risen anew from this tomb of the soul, this vessel? Again, that's what the resurrection story is about. On the third day, he rose anew. The reason for that is, as we see with the Hindu tradition, you have, as I've previously stated, the Om, right? Creation, the Trimarte or Trimerta, the Trinity, if you will. Creation, the preservation, and destruction, right? Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. That exists everywhere. This Trinity concept, the Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Or again, they're just placeholder terms for the same thing: creation, preservation, destruction. It makes sense. It seems to make sense. It's a massive allegory. See, that was the thing. See, when I was reading it, I was just, well, for example, the Old Testament, I was seeing it as very, and don't get me wrong, it is, in certain parts, it is literal. See, that's what I think. I think this demiurge, there's a part of it it's a necessary evil of the world. That it's necessary to thus preserve life, right, through destruction. So I think, honestly, that within the Old Testament, all his promises of this New World Order, essentially, I think he's duping people. I think he wants people to be filled with irrational hubris, to embrace their irrational nature rather than their rational soul. And by embracing this irrational nature of the fleshly tomb of their soul, can he thus use them vicariously as a tool of destruction of everything, and thus the preservation of existence itself. I don't know. It seems to be the case. I mean, this Yahweh character. I mean, Yahweh Yama, which is the Lord of Death. He who is round the samsara, the wheel of life, or the wheel of existence, the wheel of illusion. I mean, it all sort of ties together. I mean, even historically as well, you can actually trace the Amorites, who again became the Israelites later on down the line. You can trace them back to northern India. It's in my notes somewhere. Forget the name of the merchant class now, but their traditions are peculiarly similar to to this Amorite peoples, if you will. It's very peculiar. They even had a statue which was their demiurge, the Marduk. So did this northern Indian merchant class, within the Vedic traditions. They believed that the statue itself was alive, and that they had to submerge the statue in darkness, in a cube of darkness, a holy of holies, a Kodesh Kodoshim. Again, we see the same thing within Kemet, within the Greek and Egyptian Ptolemaic era, where you had Serapis, or again, Osiris Apis, or the Apis is the bull. The bull is basically death, sacrifice. It gores the victim. It's the destructive symbol. Or Osiris Ser. Where did Yahweh come from? Ser. Osiris Serapis. The Hebrew wilderness demon was the Serim, right? That links with the Satyr. The Satyr links with Dionysus, links with Bacchus, links with all of these various deities. Saturn as well, the golden age of Saturn, which mirrors Gan Eden. You have Jupiter as well, which, if you look at the alchemical symbols for Saturn and Jupiter, they're merely flipped. So Jupiter and Saturn are demiurgic characters. Serapis as well can also link with Sirius. And again, Sirius is the dog star. What's the reverse of dog? God, right? So therefore, what is the reverse of God in the metaphysical understanding? The demiurge, right? What's the reverse of white, which is God? Black, which is Saturn, or the demiurge, right? So the dog star would produce, depending on the tradition again, would produce death, but the death was necessary to thus attain life, right? To thus ascend. It's very, very peculiar, because in the demiurge, in the Gnostic symbol of the demiurge, you've probably seen it as the lion-headed serpent. You know what I'm talking about? You have the sun and the moon at either side. Well, the sun's behind it, right? And the light, the rays are emanating. So basically what that is another idea of this Hindu or Vedic, Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva, or creation, preservation, destruction, right? You have the demiurge, which is the lion head, Yahweh in the Old Testament. Also, the devil in the New Testament, right, is said to be a devouring lion prowling about, seeking who he may devour, right? He stands in front as like a gatekeeper, as like a cherubim, right, which is also lion-headed, in front of the threshold to Eden, right, to life. Again, Eden is the doorway to life. That's what Gan Eden means. Thus, we have to bypass him, right? It's almost like a Cerberus, right? The three-headed jackal that guards the underworld. Well, in this case, it's the lion that guards life, the gateway to life. And obviously, the circle is the universe. And behind the circle is it's the initial thought, the creative spark, if you will. So, yeah. And obviously, the serpent, indicative of the spine. It can also be a destructive symbol itself within the Orphic egg, for example. It can be that, that constriction that you have to sort of unravel, the various rings that you have to bypass, or not bypass, go through to thus ascend to a higher level of awareness or understanding of the illusory nature of unreality as opposed to divine reality, which is what we seek. So yeah, that's pretty much it. I mean, that's the general thesis behind the mysteries.
Absolutely. It's a very and that's still like a very short summary that you just all of that for the whole picture of this entire elaborate scheme, I guess. It's hard to bank of it, most days. Not that I even claim to like know a whole ton, or that's what, I saw you. I was interjecting a little bit with like Rebecca and Seven War and, the stuff that they're talking about. It's like as far as like not feeling like you don't contribute or it's like way out of your league. Like I thought it was hilarious when they said all that because it's like I'm not all that smart. Maybe intelligent and I can figure things out, but I still use a calculator and forget stuff and you know like in my day-to-day operations I feel like I'm falling apart most of the time, just trying to keep up with life. uh and I do understand as far as like yeah looking at these super duper complex trigonomic geographic numerical symbological, all the angles and degrees. When you start throwing in trigonometry, I mean, most people actually do prefer to look at Egyptian hieroglyphs, you know, and try and figure those out instead. Uh, I mean, who wouldn't want to just try and figure out what a bunch of animals and humans in different positions mean in the English language versus trying to figure out like the arc angle of a, two lines intersecting to find the tangent radius of a circle, It's all very like complex sounding. And I mean the natural force of this demiurge that is in control of the material environment to some extent, has a mass influence over it. But that's where I see in the pendulum swinging analogy, the pendulum swings back and forth. At most, in its extremes, it'll spin and turn at the extreme points, at the midpoint, but it'll never flip without an external force of any sort. So ultimately, the alpha is still always sitting on top of the omega. If you had like a teardrop type of pendulum, to represent like an A over the O. And so, in that whole flow, it's like the demiurgic force, the circle in which it exists, can only, enact within the bounds of the alpha, no matter what. So that's like when I feel that expression where it's I am the alpha and the omega is speaking from the alpha's point of view, as in he's got pure dominion over that demiurgic force. And I think that's where a lot of people struggle, where they're like, "Oh, how could the greatest thing ever that we worship and praise, that we omit creating everything and out of nothing? How could it have created this horrible thing?" It's like, okay, in our small little human form in this material world, when you go to make something, does it always turn out exactly the way you want? Or is there excess byproduct? Is there corruption in it? Is there any form of unclarity or disparity that bothers your person and what you were trying to make? I mean, and I think in the Genesis story, that's very clearly described by the demiurgic force. Even it says it, right? we God created everything from nothing, and at the beginning there was darkness in there. It was right there. It's right there in Genesis 1:2. And that's what, with this sense of clarity that I feel like you're now somewhat discovering. I think the best way that what I was thinking of when you were talking about that, where it's like when your consciousness expands and then it realizes that there's only more to expand into, and there's only more unknown within our realm of any type of prison. And I would see like the Adam and Eve story as like we've been put even into more of a delusion in this life. And as you were saying with the three, as you were talking, all I was thinking about with those three forces was, okay, there's three trimesters to the birthing cycle, which starts with creation, as in consummation. And then you were saying preservation, which would have been the incubation within the mother in the womb, the circle. And then your third and final trimester, you essentially die out of that form and are birthed out through the birthing canal between the two pillars, their legs coming out of the V, right? And I mean, just as a side note, yeah, chevron. Well, and from sex education, I mean, I saw it then, I just never really understood, but it's like the male phallic, our penis and the vagina canal with the ovaries are like it's an 8 and a 1. They're both like they look like keys. Essentially, one is a key going into another key or a lock, which that's what they are.
Which is it's the symbol of, I'm pretty sure that's I think it's called the Leviathan cross, which is, it's very close to the sigil of Saturn, and not Saturn, Satan. It's another like sigil of Satan, the adversarial or enemy force. Which, funnily enough, in the Aztec world, Yaotl was actually termed the enemy. The literal translation is the enemy. Another term from was, I think it was, I forget the Aztec now, but it was the enemy of both sides. Right. So again, like, I no, that Quetzalcoatl, or Quetzalcoatl was the nous or mind figure, if you will, the savior figure. Yaot Yeah, Yaotl would have been, or Tezcatlipoca was another term he used. Again, the Lord of the Mirror's smoke, right? This goes all the way back to, again, as you've stated, Genesis. And even in the mysteries it states, and again, this goes even further back than Gnosticism, Christian Gnosticism. This goes way, way back, where, to the Vedic traditions, where in essence this idea of how the demiurge came to be was centered around, and again they use the allegory of reflections and mirrors, that the initial thought, and again I'm paraphrasing here, the initial thought or spirit became enamored with its own reflection, and that reflection thus became enamored with its reflection, and so on and so forth. Did then the initial thought become thus diluted into, the volume of it became diluted into various vessels cascading down from the initial source. Again, well, for example, you can see in Isaiah 45:7. So this is Yahweh speaking. I form the light and create the darkness. I bring prosperity and create calamity. I, the Lord, do all these things. And I'll just read the verse 8 as well of that. Drip down, O heavens, from above, and let the skies pour down righteousness. Let the earth open up that salvation. May sprout and righteousness spring up with it. I, the Lord, have created it. So again, we get an idea potentially within that 8th verse of Isaiah 45 that drip down, O heavens. So this idea where there's many different names for it, where the angel of oblivion comes and takes the souls to, firstly the waters of Lethe, again the waters of oblivion, or it's also called Anamala Potamos. I'm probably murdering the Greek there. The river of forgetfulness or the river of mindlessness that stems in the Greek or Hellenic sense, that river stems firstly from our births, or its birth is from the cave of Hypnos, right? Where we get our term to hypnotize, right? Or hypnosis, to be in a trance, right? Because we are in a trance. That's where we go. We enter a trance state within this prison or this prisonic system. So again, drip down, O heavens, so may the spirits come down into their earthly vessels, right, through the 7 gradations of the soul to bring us into this sort of artificial form from above. So again, O heavens from above, and let the skies pour down righteousness, let the earth open up that salvation. So in essence, potentially what this is getting to in an allegorical sense is that salvation is brought, or salvation of the spirit, the enhancing of the spirit, is brought to us in this arena of suffering, this arena of calamity, of chaos, of the demiurgic force, and may righteousness spring up with it. So potentially, what it's stating here is this demiurge, this figure of death that's constantly pervading all life as a sort of shadow upon it, or existence as a shadow upon it, that it potentially may be required to bring us up, enhance our spirit, or augment us, show us, or remind us uh, really what is our true self. Yeah. Again, it's sort of twisted and sick, but it may potentially be a natural, a sort of necessity to the natural world and the natural order of things.
Well, in the paradox of creating everything out of nothing, it kind of just, to me, it just seems logically natural then. Like that's just because it's the paradox of it. That's how the creator did it. And then like everything that we're kind of playing out now, as far as like, I don't think we really have any idea where we are, like any sense of time, or even have any understanding of it.
Well, that's it. I mean, even time as well. As far as we know, I mean, humanity itself could be eternal at this point. and or man, just man in terms of not our form, but how we think, right? So this idea that, or not how we think, but in terms of the consciousness, the perception, the thought process that we seem to possess, that higher state of being. What they state is that we came about 200,000 years ago, based on the humans that are alive now, right? Again, that doesn't take into account the potential of a mass die-off somewhere back at that point. You can't just trace back all generations and say, oh, well, with the amount of people that are alive now, it seems like we came about 200,000 years back. Of course, I'm generalizing that entire theory, but that's the general premise. So they can't really do that. Again, they're taking into account, or they're making the presupposition, which is fundamentally false. I mean, it's a belief, really, that technology, along with demographic growth, would be a linear thing. Because it wouldn't regress upon the pathway of its linearity, right? There wouldn't be a mass die-off, a mass cull. That potentially even 200,000 years ago, what we were came out of what was previously, potentially through genetic engineering or what have you. There is some chromosomal evidence that points to that potential, right? For example, the prison planet theory, I posted in the Gilded server as well some information which pretty much, I wouldn't say it proves it, but the evidence strongly hints at the fact you could make a pretty strong conclusion based off, again, the karyotypic differences within the chromosomes, some of the chromosomal anomalies, which again include the strange karyotypic differences. Again, those are the forms at the end of the chromosomes. Some of them are inactivated. What inactivated them? There's also a difference between the chromosomal count or pairs between chimpanzees, or just generally apes, and humans. How did that occur? Why did that occur? How can we be just in a natural manner, of course, be directly macro evolved from apes, and again in a natural manner, in a non-artificial manner, if we have a chromosomal disparity in terms of the numbers of chromosomes? How can that be the case? And also, as well, some of the other chromosomal anomalies, as I've stated, it's impossible. It means, or what it strongly hints at, is that we were genetically engineered somewhere, in the long distant past. We're coming up to a great reset. What I am beginning to think is as above, so below, right? So in terms of Anno Mundi, the year of the world, right? Or in general, the year of this world, this iteration of the illusion of the prison, they last for about 7,000 years, right? Again, like the days of creation, that goes back to the heavenly gradations, or the heavenly emanations. Again, that's also seen within the planetary genii, of which, if you look at the demiurge and the demiurgic characters throughout history, most of them, I say most, because there's a difference we find within the Hindu tradition, there's an extra one. But within the lower emanations, the planetary genii, we find 6 traditional planets, and obviously Saturn, which is the demiurge, holds the reins of them all, right? Again, the planetary genii are the archetypal forces that are present within us, within our psyche, right? Our psyche is, because of the trauma of this all, even the trauma of birth, really, or being birthed into death, if you will. Our minds are fractured, right? And the whole point of enlightenment really is to bring all of that disparate, all of those disparate archetypes, those disparate qualities that keep us unfulfilled, to thus unify them all in a psycho-spiritual sense. Thence, we can go through the last gate on the road to perdition, right? We must go into perdition, into ruin. We have to become, again, black. Again, the baptism by fire, that's seen in the New Testament as well. Then you can rise to a baptism by the Holy Spirit. You can be immersed in the white light, if you will, right? That point from whence all other things came from. So again, obviously you can't go to the beyond of the beyond, as it's stated within the Vedic sense, but you can go through the astral plane, the causal plane. Again, they're all allegorical as well. They're not, it's not literally the astral plane or the causal plane. What it is it's a vantage point. It's infusing within you awareness of higher potentiality beyond this material existence, and it provides for you, because of that knowledge, peace. So it doesn't just teach you how to live, it also teaches you how to die, right? And it teaches you, again, as well, because of the general underlying principles of it. It also teaches you to not have fear or panic, which is what you're designed to elicit for, again, the energy harvesting of this demiurge. Again, it's that Lush idea. The reverse of Lush is Sheol, right? That's generally what we're in. So this Lush is basically the energy that's produced from the energetic fluctuations that occur within our emotional drives, occur within our instincts, right? We instinctually defend ourselves, we instinctually fight, we instinctually compete with our peers, we war with each other, we eat. We're vessels of sacrifice as well. We have to sacrifice and vampirically absorb the life force of plants, animals, to thus sustain ourselves. And we were inbuilt with that drive of self-preservation. It's very difficult for one to, unless they're equipped with the knowledge of the illusion of this world, to say starve themselves to death, right? Or to, um, you know, to turn the other cheek if they're attacked, right? Now, again, don't get me wrong, if somebody attacked me, I would defend myself. It's a natural reaction. I still haven't really got beyond that. Of course, as well, I still eat. Hence why I'm still here. And I can still engage with the material world. What I'm not stating don't eat or don't defend yourself, but again, this knowledge of the illusionary nature of these things and why they were inbuilt within these genetically engineered physical vessels, again by the demiurge, the knowledge of the illusion provides a sense of equanimity while you're here, while you traverse and journey through this existence upon this vessel, right? Of again, destiny being that which is leading you forward. So, yeah, it provides you a sense of equanimity and the knowledge. Once you reach that, that threshold point, it's like going through the vortex. You leave the eye of the storm, which is sort of calm, right? You enter the vortex, and everything is crazy until you see the scant window of light at the end, and you sail your vessel, for that, and you reach still, calm water. It's sort of like that if you were to visualize it. So, yeah, in general, you really have to start this journey, especially if you're a Christian. Well, for example, just before all of this, I sort of came to this understanding. I was, in essence, pulling apart the Bible, destroying it. Uh, I sort of had to, yeah. Well, you had to do that to see what it was saying. And again, it's the same with every other sacred work. Once you understand this, every sacred work begins to make sense. You see it because it's multi-layered as well. The symbolism behind it. I mean, it could be talking about a physical or a metaphysical force of the demiurge, right? Could be speaking about that. But it could also be speaking about we are the creators of our own nightmare and of our own dreams, right? We produce it ourselves. What it is Genesis itself. It's a battle against ourselves. It's a battle against our mind, against the fractured nature of our nature, right? And for the most part, the only way humans have found a way out of that is to understand that that which is noumenal, again, it's independent of human reason and logic. It's beyond human reason and logic. I mean, it's incomprehensible, but it's contemplative in a manner that, again, you have to think of it in allegory. So the only way we've managed to bridge that our irrational nature, our primitive nature, is to think of ourselves as a rational, soulful being, right? Is to understand that thoughts that come into our mind are noumenal. They're beyond this comprehensible reality, right? It's like the wind. Where does the wind start? Where's the origin point of the wind? We don't know, but we can feel it. We can't see it, but we feel it, right? It changes direction. It may be blowing from east to west one day, from north to south the other. It may not be, some days it may be silent, it may not blow at all. So, um, again, it's this idea of there's things in this world that we cannot possibly comprehend, right? We don't know the author or the origin point of the wind, right? We can understand the patterns of wind, the behavior of wind, but we can't understand who authored the air, the wind, right? It's where's its origin point? Well, we don't know. It's the same with thoughts. Why do we have thoughts? Well, it's the mind. Well, no, it's actually not. If that was the case with all of the neuroscience that they have, they would have came out quite strongly and stated that thoughts are, again, electrical impulses in the mind. They're not. The electrical impulses are merely the vessels which carry the thought throughout the body, but they're not the author of the thought. That's never been proven. And believe you me, the state would love to have thoughts as just electrical impulses, because then they could control your thoughts instead of just controlling the vessel which processes your thoughts, which is the mind. So, indeed, the thoughts are one of those things like the wind. We don't know where they come from, but they permeate our mind. They permeate every facet of our being. That our civilization itself, that is birthed from our mind, is actually birthed from something that's metaphysical. So everything we're seeing here is the creation of the immaterial, of the metaphysical, of that which we actually can't even comprehend. So from that which is incomprehensible has been birthed the comprehensible. So in a way, we are the creator of the physical world. I mean, we create it in our mind every day. Every day we wake up, we process the world. Again, we don't know where thoughts come from. Is the thought itself, is the universal mind, is that producing the thought of this world, this collective illusion that we're all experiencing here? Is it producing it for a specific reason? Again, like salvation of the soul? Who knows? I don't know, but sorry, man, I've rambled a wee bit. I'll let you jump in.
Perfectly fine. So I was just wrapping up my pay for everybody while I was listening to you. Very little work to do on the weekends as long as nothing's going on, but it's easier just to do these real quick and have it set, No, I mean, that's what I'm sure me and you and everyone else, for the most part on the servers, could talk circles about all this over and over, but it doesn't seem like a lot of people still like, I mean, obviously, a few of us have stranger minds than others. Or at least I was getting called out for having a wild mind, and most people can't follow, half the stuff I'm putting up. And I get it too. I know it's so just hard to understand because it is a paradox, and that's why I do think the media that they've ended up producing through, I mean, a lot of people, we call it predictive programming, but I think a lot of that own creation came from our own communities where all these ideas came from. Just like you said, like if the government could really, or any controlling being had any real creative, like, innateness and understood, they may understand like the mystery schools to some extent or are taught a few things, but like because they don't understand that connection to the inwardness versus the external, I they kind of have to do this data collection, data mining, Internet of Things kind of plan. But out of it, it generated all this media in which there was their own false sense of control that was put into that, which was created from the masses, And when it gets put out in mass media, it kind of is this weird demiurgic force that's happening where it's being recycled right back to us. And that's where it's like we see all the commonalities and all the allegory, no matter how far back we go into all these different stories of like the great deluges or these Arthurian tales, Greek tales, Roman tales, etc. Like you see it repeat and repeat and repeat because that is that creation destruction built into like the Ouroboros type symbol or the infinite symbol or however you want to look at it. And we have thousands of pictographs that you can really show those symbols, especially like in the 2D when we exist in what we're viewing as 3D. Like it's kind of a nightmare to even think about just that concept in itself. And like you were talking about earlier with the sigil of Saturn, or even I think it's the Lucifer's sigil. I'm pretty sure the Leviathan cross. I mean, that can be overlaid on the human mind and kind of look like it's two veils covering the eyes. It can be overlaid on the eyeball itself, in which that point at which the image gets flipped at is at the point of our in the center of the iris and the black area of the eye. Like that's where the inversion, well, that's part of the inversion's taking place there, right? And then it's getting flipped as it travels to the back of the eye where the optic nerve connects. So, we do see everything actually upside down where the mind has to flip it right side up in the first place. So everything we're looking at is actually this upside down world, which they just, I almost don't even think it's mocking half the time, where it's almost like it became, well, they have to generate profit still. So they started releasing all this content where it's like, well, the upside down world was very prominent in Stranger Things, right? Like that's like the main plot line of kind of the entire story is all about this upside down world that exists in the world we do live in, and that's right in the media for you. And then like Inception kind of gives you that whole idea of a world within a world, you know, a dream within a dream, which plays out in reality with, like, you know, DC and the Vatican and London, but also plays out in the sense of, like, that's kind of how I view possibly where we went, and why theories like the matrix theory or the AI computer theory of, you know, we're just purely data existing as form from thought or thought, and this is like a simulation essentially, as you know, it's just kind of, if you look at that like an allegorical story, in this age of dataism, that makes perfect sense, really. um, then I would see like the Garden of Eden would be like that Midgard. It was almost like the beta, the preliminary kind of test to the total system, um, in which that creation, you know, after God said there, let there be light, and so on and so forth, that whole happened in that little system of the Garden of Eden. Then it happened again. They fell again to where we are today. We're the offspring of the offspring, and of many, many, many generations through this life of, you know, birth, rebirth, death, death, rebirth, life, over and over and over. And it kind of makes you question, you know, how far does that go? It would be a huge question. And is it, you know, is that the purpose, to go to that far extreme in order to essentially hit the one side, bounce off, and start going the other? I mean, if you really look at the test of it, it's like, you know, you're almost born into this world guaranteed to fail. And it's only those who continually fail and keep continually seek truth and keep moving forward, that, you know, that's where I see that blackening process is happening over and over in all sorts of various forms, in your thought, your mind, your physical body, your spirit, your soul. You know, the words don't even do it justice for half the stuff we're really talking about. But we know we have that understanding to some extent, I think, and that's where it's like, that's where all this stuff's so exciting. Like, that's what I love talking about all this. Where, you know, I remember with my cousins growing up, close friends at the time, or various family members, or even people I met out in the world just for a short time, where you make those really fast, quick connections, almost like what would be considered love at first sight for some married couples, and that kind of stuff is, you know, you start talking about it, and some people, like, they only can make it a couple minutes before they just they'll start cracking a joke, or they're gonna go into some sort of toilet humor, or they're gonna avoid, deflect, and evade, because you're touching on paradigms that has been so ingrained into them and into the perception that they were given, you know, without question. It's a militant style brainwashing program, you know, on the entire populace, you know, via like television and radio and frequency. I mean, it's, I mean, there is the imagery, but I think the biggest and the most dangerous that's just gone unnoticed for so long is the electricity. I think it's the way that we how this whole power grid of electricity's been hooked up is that's what I would attribute more to giving people cancer than like smoking anything. I'm sure inhaling toxic chemicals will also give you lung cancer. And ironically enough, in Breaking Bad, that was literally the pilot episode was all about why he started making heroin out in the Arizona desert was because he got lung cancer because and he was not a smoker. He was a chemistry teacher that dealt with certain toxins and chemicals he inhaled probably in his lab due to lack of knowledge. So, it's like that kind of stuff is where I start going like, that's where I would question tobacco and all those types of things. And, not that they're not detrimental, but there's definitely like, we live in an inverted world and it is literally everything. It's all inverted, you know. Morality is preached, but it's not practiced, you know. Just like you said, it's like we talk about all these harmful effects and we talk about all these horrible how horrible is heroin, crack cocaine, and all these other things are these terrible, terrible drugs. Ironically, heroin is actually just the street form of morphine. Crack is just the street form of basically any benzodiazepine. And yeah, cocaine's your street product of like speed and an epinephrine and a whole bunch of other stuff. Like they're literally the things that are produced by the medical industry just at the street level. Literally. It's right in the wording. I mean, and to me it is insane. Like it is so inverted where it's preached how horrible everything is, yet all of these people go do it. It's almost like a reverse psychology of the masses, like a mass reverse psychosis. Speak about how bad it is, but speak about it in that way. Like it's not even like repeating the lie until it becomes truth. It's the tone in which you're repeating it is like comedic, even though it'll kill you. Everybody dies anyway, right? Like that's how they sell it. Yeah, it's oh my god, no, don't have sex with anybody ever. Oh, there's venereal diseases everywhere out to get right. It's all the boogeyman stories, and then and then they flip. Oh yeah, but no, we should have orgies during COVID lockdowns.
Yeah, it keeps you constantly in this. Again, as you state, it destroys your mind because of the fractured nature that's put on it, and it's what the demiurge seeks. Again, divide and conquer. That's what seems to be the primary modus operandi of this creature. But yes, yeah, the fire, yeah, the crucible of the gauntlet, yeah, absolutely. So in that essence, it is a necessary thing. It's necessary. Um, but yeah, it's it's very strange as well because I was even there's a few things within the book of Ezekiel as well. I'm getting on a tangent here, but it's I'm not joking you. It actually states the house of God. Now this is I think he uses the term Elohim in the verse. I may be incorrect. It states the house of God is four. It's like a square, right? It's got I think it's four. I think it's stated four sides. Um, and each side is what was it 500 by 500 or something like that. When you actually think about it and look at it like that, it actually it sort of mirrors the quote um how they show the Big Bang, you know, in terms of not a projection outwards circularly of everything, but some of the theories that state that this thing emanated outwards, you know, like a a cube, and you have the line, you have the vanishing point in the distance. Again, if you, in fact, I'll post it. Yes, it's the tetrahedron. Yes, but it's like projected out to the vanishing point. So yeah, it's quite amazing because again, this biblical idea, which also exists throughout every other sacred work. Let's be honest, in various different ways, it pretty much overlaps that. It's just in an allegorical format, you know. And that, by the way, that's also found in string theory. In fact, that is actually a sort of idea from string theory. This idea of the, the sort of what would you call it? Like the funneling, like an inverse funnel. Like it's funneling itself out, like a shotgun blast, if you will. That it gradually gets wider and wider and wider. It gradually gets more and more complicated. The further it goes on, the more space it carves out of this nothingness. I mean, it's beyond nothingness. It's not. At least nothingness actually can be defined because it's a space that contains nothing. I mean, that which it's actually carving this sort of space out of is not even, it's non-space. It's, I mean, yeah, it's totally incomprehensible. We don't even have the language to describe it. I'm sure there's terms and quantum mechanics to describe it, but yeah. So I mean, you're sort of seeing it's the same thing. Again, who produced the Big Bang? It was a Jesuit priest. Again, somebody who would have been well versed in the mysteries. As we understand, um, Ignatius Loyola has spiritual exercises, all very Kabbalistic, right? Which again goes back to the mysteries, goes back to the Vedas. I mean, that goes further back as well to prehistory, right? We could, describe it as Atlantis, Shangri-La, all of these various, pre-catastrophe, prehistory civilizations. But it's the same idea, constantly recurring. So obviously, because of this recurrence, it has to have a basis in truth, because it wouldn't have been held to so vigorously, these mysteries, if they were mere opinion that couldn't be verified, right? Either directly through experimentation, which goes to the idea that these various civilizations that have preceded this longue durée, this period we're in now, that they were more advanced, right? Again, if they could verify this via experimentation, or even some sort of mathematical experimentation, or even a sort of simulation of it. I don't know how you would do that, but an experimentation of it to verify it in the material universe, or through inference, logical inference. So, however we spin it, really, it's what we're looking at is there's some sort of civilization that put forward these mysteries, that figured out this in what manner we can only imagine, either directly through technology, or as I've stated, through philosophy and inference born out of that, of these deep truths about the universe. So yeah, however we spin it, we're going back to this idea of pre-catastrophe, prehistory, a civilization that that's no longer remembered, or we no longer have extant direct records of. We have mythology of it. We just don't have actual records that tell us the name of this civilization, what they called themselves, the language they spoke, blah 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 blah. So yeah, which goes back to how really it is. It tells us how thorough the destruction of it was, right? Um, that nothing it remains. But then again, there is rumors. I say rumors. There's rumors in the records. You know, mythology and some historical gossip, should we say, which does point to the fact that there probably was extant records somewhere in the ancient or classical era of this pre catastrophe civilization, Atlantis or whatever you want to call it. But it was destroyed. Again, as we see with the demiurgic force, it kills anyone or anything that learns of its illusory nature, right? That learns of the illusion and attempts to disseminate that knowledge in a direct manner, or has the ear of a considerable number of people. So again, they had to get rid of the knowledge of it. The disciples of the demiurge, the followers of the demiurge, those who are possessed by the demiurge. Again, as you were stating, this religion, they've distorted religion so it no longer speaks of allegorical truths. It's now literal interpretation. It's now infantilization of the adult mind. So they no longer see the deeper truth of God within it. They merely see the demiurge and the demiurge's commands, and they follow the demiurge all the way off the cliff, as the demiurge desires for them to do, because this entire illusion runs on sacrifice and energetic fluctuations. Again, the wages of sign are is death. So the sine wave produces the energetic frequency. It literally provides the motion to this existential reality or unreality that is emanated from, again, as it states in this diagram, the Big Bang, right? But we would know that as the initial thought, the divine reality, the spirit, the white light. It's it's everything. It's just the same idea constantly reiterated, which, yeah, potentially may have came from a pre-catastrophe civilization, but it seems humans are naturally inclined as well to walk towards this, what we would know as the mystery schools. They're naturally inclined, if they pursue knowledge, they're naturally inclined to come to this understanding. Again, based on sacred sciences, sacred geometry, and allegorical exposition of deep truths regarding etiology, or the beginnings and creation of the cosmos, and the differentiations of states of being and states of existence and what have you. So again, that may lead us to believe that whatever we've emanated from clearly is contained within us, at least as a fractal essence, or a particle essence. So yes, I mean, that's all I have to say on that.
I mean, really, it could be, if it was if we're holding this fractal piece of that essence, and measurements are just taken in units. A unit is just relative only in the physical realm. Therefore, you could say that even as a fractal, it's like you do hold the essence of the whole. It's just a bunch of us do. It's not it's not uniquely one all-encompassing being. It's a multitude. And I mean, and that's where I think that's just where people can't conceptualize it. Whether it's just because you have to, like, you do have to break those down, just like you said, breaking down the Bible, breaking down different religions, the control structures in which we exist, just questioning the simple, like, most people just go to a certain point. After something 30 years ago, they're done. If it was all said and done 30 years ago by whatever branch of authority, they don't question. Or 50 or 100 years. Some people don't know what they had for breakfast, So it's like, everyone's got their extent. I think that goes the same, like they say it all the time, with everyone has their price. When everyone has their price, that's the price they'll pay to sell something they don't even have necessarily, or that, they're claiming an ownership over something that's not necessarily theirs. It's all of ours, and they're deciding to sell that out. And in the world that, in the sacrificial sense of the demiurgic forces, that's the way to sell out, is essentially to kill others, kill the essence of others. Is, if you're going to sell something that doesn't even belong to you in the first place. You see how that kind of plays in a weird way. And it's like just trying to wrap your head around that concept. That's where I see where people are. They become so self-absorbed into that image, their reflection that they've created in their mind. And their minds just played it back at them in such a way that it's so enticing to be this lazy and slothful and, like, yeah, other people should do the work so that I don't have to type mentality becomes a norm. It becomes a that's all those. Yeah, that is the drug. And I mean, power, that's like, I've been addicted to many drugs. Power is hardly one of them. That's the one that I've was fearful of for a long time. Because I saw that with having that addictive personality, being put in a position of power is very dangerous. And I didn't, it's like I don't like my position because I am in this place where the powers above me place me into, I'm in the pickle of where they enforce things that, in a way that I wouldn't manage or supervise. I let people tend to be, but people above me are micromanagers and go against my macro management type style, and it, force me into these situations where I have to make a decision to stick to what I believe and how I operate in my soul's essence, and then, or due to the fact of my physical fears to losing, like, the livelihood in which, tied here, that provides sustenance not just for myself now, but also my better half. Like, I fully support her. She doesn't work. She has and stuff, but I would rather her not. I would rather be the one slaving away solely, and she can just work for us and our homestead. So, and I mean, it took her a while. She was kind of all for the working thing because of the influences of her mom, who's very like mine. And, like, you have to get a job, you have to do this, that kind of thing. And that's where it's like I've learned all these other wild things, that all of these little bits and pieces just in my everyday life all match into all the stuff that we talk about constantly. Just as men, like, we compartmentalize everything naturally. That's what logic and ordering is. It's it's kind of a trap, really, if you try to separate everything and keep it separate all the time. I mean,
Detail this idea of breaking things down and the gates that we have to go through. Really, what you're doing is, again, this is in a non-physical manner, of course. What the Demiurge has done is distorted this truth. We're actually sort of reigniting the divine feminine in a way. That part which was taken out of us, we're now placing it back in. We're making whole the duality, right? We're unifying the duality, and we're seeing everything holistically in that sense, which is what generally women do, right? Now, to see God, I don't mean literally. I mean to know of God, to see to comprehend that, or whatever you want to call it, the initial thoughts, or the the centrometer of all forces. I don't know. So the vortex of everything, the eye of the storm. You have to think holistically about it. You have to take everything together, put it together, become almost a recognizer of patterns, a profiler of a vast quantity of information. You have to become a polymath, really. That's the thing. A lot of us actually on these calls, we're polymaths. We actually delve into multiple, or we have expertise, varying degrees of expertise in multiple disciplines, multiple fields, which is not what academia seeks primarily, at least in Britain. I mean, we're far stricter in that sense. It's all about specialization, because that's what the demiurge seeks. It only seeks slaves. Slaves specialize. Thinkers explore, right? Intrepid men explore. The true spirit explores. A free man goes wherever the sole of his foot takes him, right? Again, it's actually quite hilarious. The etymology of plantation is, I just looked this up, planta re. So basically, planta is the foot or the sole, and re is, you could think of it like the circle. So it's basically, the plantation is, in essence, having the sole of your foot or footstep going around in circles. So you have a small area you can't go away from, right? This is it. It's the plantation of your mind. It's the plantation that academia is. It's the plantation that the society is. It wants to keep you going in circles, right? Which in essence, a very small circle, of course, you don't see anything. But, in many ways, we too are going in circles, but it's more like a spiral. It's like a corkscrew. The more that we're finding, the greater the circle that we're traversing onto becomes. So we're exploring, we're charting new territory. They are merely sort of one-dimensionally sticking to the prescribed path that their NPC avatar was set to be upon. And again, it's sad because we're at the end of an age, and it's vital. It's of vital importance that they begin to cultivate that fire inside of them. That they begin to cultivate their heart, their mind. They begin to take on a greater level of awareness of what's going on here. And I mean, many people say, well, what about time? The hours? Well, I know you work at was an 80-hour week. I'm pretty much like a 10-hour shift, 5 days a week. Sometimes I work the weekend. Rarely, but sometimes. I mean, I have time. I have time to do videos. I have time to write a book as well. So it's just how you choose to spend your time. That's the problem. Again, people, it's their choice, inevitably. This place is merely a school, a sanctuary, as Seven Noir says in the Gilded server. This is a school. We're here to be taught, and we're taught through the stimulation of pain and suffering, and through the sort of jaded nature that comes with that, with the momentary parts of pleasure and happiness. So again, it's almost like MK Ultra. They're seeking to the demiurge is seeking to compartmentalize us, break down our mind. It doesn't seek unification of the whole, of the entire corpus, of the entire body of the mind. What it seeks is a greater and greater division of it. Almost, what would the term be? A sort of logarithmic subdivision of it. It's just constantly going down and down and down and down and down in terms of, well, no, sorry, that wouldn't be logarithmic. Parabolic would be the better term. Sort of parabolic subdivision of the mind. It just is, it's like this spike downwards of ignorance, really. It's just being driven into ignorance. And it spirals down. The a fantastic example of that is actually social media. Social media engenders that. People create basically altars of themselves. They even people post up, look how great my life is. I'm getting on so well with the wife. And then behind closed doors, when he's not taking pictures, he beats her. You know, it's like religion in a way. The pastor, oh, he's a great guy, but behind closed doors, he beats the wife. And he's a chronic gambler and a drug addict, and pedophilia. He uses prostitutes and that, and then he's like holy, holy. Come the day of the him going onto the pulpit and speaking to the congregation. So again, they take on alters, personalities. They create egos. Again, it's that idea of the mirror. They look into the mirror. In the case of social media, they don't like what they're looking at, so they change, right? And then they fall in love with that image. And then that image creates another image of itself, and so on and so forth. Before you know it, they're driven to narcissism. They're driven into ignorance. They don't know where they came from. They don't know their original personality, their original essence. They lose it amongst the darkness, amongst the reflections, or the false reflections. So again, that's what the demiurge seeks. And also everything that's going on, the wars, the fear, the market, oh my God, everything's ending. That's another thing it seeks. Is for you to see that and to thus panic, to become scared. There was something I was looking at, it's the etymology, some sort of etymological root of a word, which linked to the demiurge. It linked to man actually, and it was fear and panic. I forget now, but I remember reading it. I was like, wow, that just makes so much sense. But yeah, that's what we are. We're creatures of fear and panic, and worry. Again, that's driven by the instinct of survival. And why do we survive? Well, it's to procreate. It's our evolutionary nature. It's the biology of us. Yes, but why do we have that? Where did that come from? Why does existence, which is ephemeral, which is temporal, why does it seek to reproduce itself if it knows it's just subjecting the next generation to that same ephemerality and thus temporal or temporary existence and destruction? Why? Where does that impulse come from? Nobody really asks that. They don't ask that question. And science, again, is very reductionist because it seeks, like a religion, to keep us in the boundaries set by the demiurge. And if we're in those boundaries, we can't elevate ourselves. We can't break free from the physical shackles. And again, thus see see the forest beyond the trees. See the entire expanse of this prison, rather than just the single bars upon the cell. We see the thing holistically. Again, that's where the divine feminine comes into it. Taking on that divine feminine allows us to see everything holistically, to see it in its full profundity, and again, sort of bring ourselves beyond it in any way we can, be it spiritual, mental, or even physical in a way. I mean, exercise can actually sort of invigorate the mind. So again, that would be a physical way to get beyond the sort of fear and the panic of it all.
Got to get past the cherub in the garden.
Yeah, pretty much, man. Yeah, absolutely. With the flaming sword, or the sign.
The religions teach, I'm pretty sure most of them do, that, if you were to ever encounter that spirit embodiment of whatever evil, demonic, devil, demon, Luciferian force or whatnot, that to turn and run, be afraid, basically, right? It's like, I'm pretty sure if he's the cherub guarding the garden, that's the person you have to confront and face, which essentially is just going to be your own reflection. Truly. All right. I mean, it's funny because, not funny, I guess it's funny in a morbid way, but my cousin that passed, he overdosed on heroin. Sad story, but I mean, it's his mom's still alive somehow. She's been in and out of rehab 36 times, something like that. So, but when he passed away, my dad had said a saying he said many times, but that time it made more sense because it was, like a year and a half ago. He said, "Yeah, your cousin lost to the beast." And my dad's not very spiritual whatsoever, and emotionally a child, but in all other aspects, he's very intelligent or smart in many other aspects. But yeah, it's just how he said it too. It kind of was that, like, yeah, he lost to his demon, which is all of our demons, but it's a version of yourself. It's that reflective version. It's almost exactly identical to you in every single way, yet it's the exact opposite, right? And I've always looked at it that way as far as people who have lost out to like overdose or committing suicide or whatever. That is, they were fighting the good fight and they just didn't make it, or it was their time. And I think growing up surrounded by death a lot, being around my grandparents mostly, their friends started dying when I was a very young child. My half their friends were, in their 80s and 90s when I was, 2, 3 years old. And a lot of my older family members and stuff too, as well. So it's like I was at, a couple hundred funerals by the time I had even got cognition or any sense of development or grasp of the world, in which we exist to some extent. And so just being around those people and in those environments, um, surprisingly, I mean, even with, I guess we're probably, most of my relatives and most of the funerals we attended, were some sort of, at least like a Catholic Christian. I know they've had some like Middle Eastern or like Muslim friends that we went to theirs and experienced, the different cultural as far as how they bury their dead. I think we're all very different for sure. But I always found it very surprising that, there's people crying and there's that mode of like, it's very sad. And I think anyone passing it, that's just how we associate that. Um, but since I was so young and developing while it all happened, I just kind of saw like the brighter side where I was like, this person, they lived a life and they here's all these people who loved them throughout their life, and now they got to move on and get out of this fleshy prison. I mean, at the time I didn't know what that was, but that was kind of the idea I was having, like, yeah, they got to get out of here. Like I developed that instinct very quick that like we're like a soul or a spirit embodied in a physical form. It's that existence I've always understood to some extent. And so like at funerals, I know that became a big thing with talking to everybody. That's actually where you see some of the most real people you'll ever see, like the realist version of somebody. Or at least it used to be. Now you can see there's like girls doing selfies with their father in the open casket and they're like smiling with their butt stuck out, So it's like there's obviously that, but among the older people when their friends were passing, like that's who I was interacting with a large portion, of my childhood. And then on top of that, just interacting, I my grandpa started working from home like almost shortly after I was born. So like he was kind of one of the primary babysitters, I guess you'd say. Uh, and it was great. He worked at home, so I was home all the time. He was very strict about his like I didn't go in his office whatsoever. He'd be in there from like, 9 to 12, take a half-hour lunch break, and then 12:30 to 5:30. Like he literally he was very scheduled. And they lived at they my parents live in that house now. It's like on a lake. It's a walkout basement. So like a smaller house. We fixed it up for years. I mean, we've altered it hundreds of times in different ways, but it's got the beach and the lake. And like the office downstairs overlooks that lake, so it's my grandpa had the life, he was a tax accountant. So he was just doing people's taxes and collecting the money for it and then hanging out on the lake every day. It's a pretty good life. But he developed that strict schedule to try to avoid, getting too lost and just actually, not actually doing the work for his clients. And then on top of that, he would babysit me, but I was so self-sustaining at a young age. I just the TV and some toys and some other things, and I was good the whole 4 or 5 hours, at a time. And but he also had to go make trips, so we'd go see his clients in person. So I was on a lot of those, and we would go up to the Mott Foundation, which was like the accounting firm he worked for up in Flint. That when he broke away, it's like he kind of went on his own personal contract and then held his old company as like a client that he would help with like overflow work, for whatever pay was agreed upon per the contract. But I remember going up there, and it's like he was, one of the senior CPAs there before he left and went on his own. So it's like when we were going back there, we're sitting in the boardroom with the presidents and the CEOs and the FOs, and from 5 years old until I was 12, I would go and basically be having boardroom discussions with the Mott Foundation, organizers. And that was like, it's one of the stories I get told over and over, where my grandma came with us occasionally, or my mom would come and, pick me up from there, because it was like they were going late into the middle of the night, and my grandpa couldn't get away for whatever reason. So someone would have to come get me. And it's like when they would come get me, I would be in the lobby entertaining, a bunch of like 50 and 60-year-olds, and like, what was going on with Bill Clinton and Monica Lewinsky at the time. At like 6 or 7 years old. And it was just, or talking like Mad Money with, I think it was Max back then or whatever, Mad Max. I mean, there still is a Mad Max now too, but like, and it bringing up like, Dell at the time, I think, was the exploding tech company in the early 90s. And it's like, I would be like, man, I would be buying up that stuff right now. All these old CFOs and stuff are like, man, he's got insider information, And it's like, no, really, I just watch CNN all day, because that's what Grandpa always had playing, and one of the other TVs almost always had CNN. So, or whatever, the money talk channels and stuff. But, and that's, you get I've got the, I don't know what to call it. It's just when, people, you hear the same thing a lot from people when they make a reference to you, and it'd be like, oh, you have a really old soul, or an old spirit. Yeah. Right. And that's where I think like anybody in our chat rooms here can relate to that one. That's something about just being empathetic. I think that's what our ancient, or in our ancestral roots, that probably was like when you see the star cities, or like these races like the Atlanteans or Lemurians and stuff. I see that those societies were completely built on they built like the star cities types concepts we see a lot associated with all that. And the grand architectures that still exist today, and you can see how it's been remodeled and like paper mache half the time. So it's like, okay, there's a lot of validity to all this stuff. Of course, I always question like the release of information over the last 10, 20 years, and like all these, Telegram groups and YouTube channels and esoteric teachings, and even like the Greenland theory type book coming out. Like, for all we know, that website was created 2 years ago, and saying that the book was published in 2014. Like, how do you know? We can go do an inspect element page of the HTML and go dig through it. That can be altered too. I don't care what you show me. You can alter anything. We are the creators. That's where I see the big lie. They were telling us that back in school when we started getting computers. I don't know. You got to probably, just depends on your city, really, and like what the money flows like. But I know, no, computers at school. Yeah. So when we were doing the computer classes, like I hated that when they would tell us, computers don't lie. That was the biggest lie right off the bat. I knew that right away. I was like, "What are you talking about? I can make this computer lie to you all day. I mean, what are you talking about? Oh, computers, no, computers are never wrong. It's like you're already giving AI a modicum of benevolence before it's even been a thought. Or, well, I guess Terminator was around by that time for us, but You are. That was given society like this. No, a computer being a processor, you know, never can be wrong. That can't be done, you know.
It lacks empathy,
Yeah,
you know?
exactly.
Lacks empathy. So if it doesn't have empathy, well, firstly, it can't be intelligent. But secondly, it's just dangerous. It's not even an artificial intelligence. Really, all it can be used for is data processing, control, or war.
It's a ladder logic tree. Like it only can do the relay bits of that dualistic process within like that binary 8-bit code in which this, and we can algorithmic it, it up and do all the variable changes to emulate emotion. But I think that's where these little chrysalis pieces that make us up, that make up an entirety of all existence and creation through perception and whatever. Like that's what you can try and mimic it, but it's built right into the code. Like no matter how much they digitize, connect us with these, wires, which essentially symbolize snakes. Um, and the electricity and the grid and how that all this set up, like sure, I look at it like theory versus practical application. In theory, the internet of things would be this great and wonderful thing that could connect all of us in some sort of way and do all these great things. Too bad we live in a society that has millions of forms of communication yet lacks the ability to communicate properly. So it's so interwoven and interthreaded. That's what I see. Like, we got a couple of people here and there that are still kind of trying to shout from the rooftops on either the Go. The one guy's still going on Go a lot with Jason, and I see, there's some people who are still going on about like, oh my God, they're sacrificing children. Yes, that's been happening since the start. I don't know what you want us to do about. It's the sad truths of the world that you have to get over and understand that, well, they're happening with some sort of purpose. You don't understand it. We're so far removed from those circles that it's outside of the realm of, you know, if you really want to understand it, you're going to go dive into it and you'll find out. You'll find out why it exists, and you're going to find out horrible things. You're going to find out there's terrible people who will just stop on a. They found that's the rarest thing. The rarest thing would be human babies that you can essentially buy like products on a shelf. That's probably the rarest thing that you can possibly get in this world at this moment. So of course it'll be the highest valued thing, and that's whatever blood, whichever one of our blood types, and all these different various aspects. It's all just like it's liquid gold, liquid silver, liquid. That's the blood of us, of people, and that's like all the sustenance that we consume. That's what it's going to enliven. That's well, the things that we're destroying and breaking down in order to preserve is the blood, the water of life, the embodiment, the physical, at least in this realm, the realm of physicality and the four elements, conjoined by the fifth. And,
Well, it also seems to contain spirit as well.
yeah,
I've
yeah,
I've seen, for example, blood transfusions. Really, I mean, people that have lost lots and lots of blood, and they've had almost pretty much a full blood transfusion. They've just been on death's door, and they've just managed to not bleed out. There's other ones who have had organ transplants, and again, these people that have received transfusions and organs of donors, they have seemingly, there's a phenomenon. where they take on the characteristics or the personality of their donor at the time.
And the memories.
And the memories. Yep, and the memories. So, again, it might not be the spirit, but yeah, the mind. So, or the thoughts and the memories. So it's not just contained within it's the record of everything you do here isn't just contained in your mind. It doesn't just die with your mind. It's contained throughout your body, contained throughout your blood, and it's also it's contained in a sort of metaphysical manner as well. It's an imprint upon your very soul. It's like a record of how well you've done. As well, I mean, look at what they're doing with the digital system. That they're this digital golem of the world that they're creating. They're creating or attempting to manifest the demiurge itself into the physical world. Again, vis-a-vis establishing the organs of it. So they're establishing its brains via the data processing centers. They're establishing its veins and nervous system via the fiber optic cables, and also wirelessly as well.
Yeah.
Via the towers. So what you're really seeing is they're attempting to create a massive worldwide golem, a manifestation of the demiurge, not just as a metaphysical thing above the physical prison, the physical creation, but it's actually interwoven into it, where we shall all be merged into its manifestation directly, potentially even the soul as well. We will no longer worship it. We shall literally have to bend the knee to it. Our entire spirit will become so ingrained with it in this system. So obviously, as Harari states it, the Internet of Things will be like God. Will be like God. Again, Adonai Eloheinu, the Lord is God, right? Again, if the Lord was God, you would just call him God. Again, the Internet of all things will be like God. It will be like God. It will be like the initial source of all things, because we're all going to be merged with that. That will be the new source of us, of our spirit.
Well, that's our
Yes.
savior.
Yeah. The Antichrist. Yep. That's the only place we can go to the point of light, the point of salvation now. The point of light will be the fiber optic cable.
We have your gold. That's if you want your gold, I have the access to it. For whatever that as a modicum of means to live in the physical.
Absolutely. Yep.
And I see that as how they're gonna use that as the leash of control over all of us, with our livelihoods tied to the same couple companies that run the world. But that's where it's like I see the simplicity in it, where if they try and pull that and everyone rejects it at a certain level, trying to think of like how to say this exactly. I wouldn't even think it would take a lot of us. I think it would just take enough with the right mindset and enough push that then the whole thing will fall down. I think it's such a delicate system that really it wouldn't even take that many. Uh, you know,
I think this demiurge actually desires an uprising. I think he desires.
That's what I mean. I don't think the uprising will happen.
No, but I think I agree with what you're saying. I think he wants the House of Cards to come down. I think in a way,
It's controlled destruction, and is how I see we're living in. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, absolutely. I agree. Yeah.
But and I think the uprising, I think, is like that would be the means to the mass sacrifice, and that's where I see like I don't think everyone's just gonna get up and go grab their guns and go run out to take down the government. I think everyone's in this weird the isolation backfired, or any of these plans have like the confusion and chaos they created. They went the limit was broken. And that's why I see even in regular day society, like nobody's listening to the news like 2 years ago. I mean, even the alt media that I've sent people down and then went and kind of followed up months later, they're like, "Oh yeah, that guy's a shill too." You know? Like, and I haven't even talked to them about that. I sent the video just as kind of like a small seed of like we were talking about whatever, and I was like, "Hey, check this out. You know, here's a BitChute video. Try to get off YouTube once in a while. Here's Odyssey. You know, like just try to look at some other stuff once in a while." And yeah, they'd come back and they'll start using terminology that it was like, I had never heard uh, thousands of the terms that we use just in the English language. Nonetheless, all these other languages we've picked up over time here, and never in my wildest dreams did I think I would be like studying or even attempting to speak Swahili or Sanskrit or Egyptian or cuneiform or the Native American, like Mayan languages, hieroglyphs. I mean, I looked at them and I always had like an appeasement to learn it. But I was under the impression, and as we're taught, that it takes years to learn any language, nonetheless, like a dead language. Like you were saying, where academia is all about just being isolated to one profession, isolated to like one skill, not even the whole skill set, just this skill. And so it makes you think that, like, oh man, if I want to learn, hieroglyphs, it's like I'll have to go to university for 4 years just to study Egyptian. And I'm going to have to go down this wild path. And in reality, pretty sure if I had 2 weeks and nothing else to do, I could probably learn the majority of Egyptian hieroglyphs or cuneiform or Hebrew. I don't think language is all that difficult to learn. Um, and not just language, it's anything. It goes for any of it. It's that motivation, the driving force, the thought that we don't know where it comes from. But when you actually grab it, it just explodes into like this, like what we're doing all the time. And that's where I do see like Genesis is a physical, deathly birth of debt and this demiurgic force, and that's the God it pretends to be the whole time is the actual creator God of all, not just the physical. But it's when you go to the other end in Revelation, that's where you get these revelations. That's why it's called that. It's like to revel in, to revolve, to motion, the rotor, the engine, the driving force, the everything is derived from this thought. That the best thing I would say that I've imagined it being is that the primordial waters of all of creation that I sure they're actually in the water. The water, we can't see water really. What we see actually is this call it liquid substance that's actually filled with contaminants. I mean, really, the water that you distill is like the clearest water you'll ever see because you've like removed almost every actual physical material contaminant from it. And what is what's interesting about water and its relation to density? Well, in our pseudo-scientific realm, they base all of density off of the density of 1.00 grams per cubic liter, I believe. Why is that? Why do we base all matter off of water? Specifically like 1.00, cubic grams or cubic milliliters or whatever it is. I always found that interesting. That is the same like that, the very basic relations of like the temperature and how temperature works. It is one thing, yet it's two things. Um, or the interrelation between time and frequency, as time equals 1 over the frequency and vice versa. Frequency equals 1 over time. Like there's all these really, really basic equations that we go through them with the golden ratio, the golden circle, the pyramidal numbers, the trigonal numbers, even the exclamation point ones. I always forget what they're called, but where you just keep multiplying that number plus all the numbers before it. The Fibonacci sequence, is literally like the creative spiral of life. You're talking all about
And even natural factorials as well. I mean, that proves it.
the factorials. That's what it is.
Even one, even the number one, sort of proves the entire thing. But as well, it's even with the burning of sage. I've noticed this. When you burn sage, it turns charcoal black at the end with obviously the fire, and then the white smoke rises. Amazing, it just, that allegory itself explains it all. Yeah, what you need to do. Burn away the old husk. Let let the fire ignite away the darkness. That which remains must be true, right? So it's sort of a reductive process, right? It's a what's called I think it's a postiakos, or pardon me, yeah, I think it is a postiakos, or a what's called via or via negativa, or again a sort of process of negation. You're taking away things that are part of unreality by exposing it to fire, by exposing it to destructive or disintegrative principles, or the igneous principle, right? Things that are destructive to it. You critique it, put it to the test. If it fails the test, it burns to non-existence, right? You discard it. And you keep doing that consistently until you get to the truth. The truth is that which can withstand the heat. Anything that doesn't withstand the heat, obviously, is already has been filtered out. So what you find is the truth of you, the truth of the universe, the truth of God. I mean, that's the path, that's the way, if you will. That's this idea of the way.
Now, what do we do with this knowledge? That's what, like, I mean, I see it as just a reason to continue on, really. I see this stuff all the time. I mean, I don't even come up all the, for the last, probably since the summer, so sometime 8 months ago, 9 months ago. You said something earlier about when your thoughts come, you don't know where they come from, and it just sends you on these paths. And I think like you and Keys kind of did it a little bit earlier in one of the chats, right? Like it spins, and then you kind of bounce off each other. It's this reverberatory dialogue that starts between, and we all do it with each other at various times and chats and stuff. And where all that, stems in the whole system you know, it's funny because it's like it's almost like it's coming from that demiurgic force, you know, and because it's embedded into the system, it's feeding itself essentially through us, siphoning off that energy, you know. And we're the opposing forces to that, in which we're trying to protect our energy and to survive through until we go through this blackening and whitening process and purification into our spiritual essence. And I that's just the spiritual essence. I think there's quite a few levels to it, right? With as far as, I mean, a big part of mine was learning the physical first. But I let that go completely and destroyed my body in various ways and gained weight and lost weight and did different things. Only being one aspect to, you know, then there is the mental and the battle between, you know, your mind and your heart. And there's the spirit, which is even above the mind, you know, which is where you could kind of place that demiurgic force along with its son, which really could be its brother for all we know. And the system will just continue expanding until forever is how I would see it. Just because if you're going to try to define what is eternity, well, it's infinite. It's not even definable. The definition of it is the indivisible, undefinable essence. You know, just like you said earlier, can all be summed up in the number one. You can fracture it, you can break it into all sorts of decimals and digits and numbers and zeros, on and forever. In that direction, you can also go in the multiplication addition direction. You can also go negative to positive in any direction, and infinitely. They'll always continue repeating on and on and on, no matter what, in any direction. And they always make sense, although they do not. And they exist and they don't exist at the same time. And it's funny because it sounds like, even to myself, or at least my ego, I sound like I don't make any sense at all. I feel like I'm listening to like Yoda or some other guru or mastermind of deception and deceit. You know, it's almost like we're tricking ourselves. That's why even in all the competition of any type of competition, through sports, through work, life, school, I always took the Sun Tzu saying of like fighting the enemy where he's not type thing, as to me that just meant I'm the enemy. All of these other people hardly exist. The only person that is trying to get better is me. That's all I'm concerned with, because I'm the one that's in the body controlling the functions as far as I know. So then when it came to like football and stuff, I could care less. My one buddy, you know, that did the NFL thing, it's like it didn't matter. I could tackle him every single time. He could never get past me if I didn't want him to. No matter the size, the weight, the speed, didn't matter. I mean, my objective was to take him down, and I knew his mind so well because I knew my own. It didn't even have to do with our physical stature. It had nothing to do with, you know, overall mentality. And even at those times, I was really lost at that time. I was, you know, hardly anything of the man I've become today. But I still had that same fractal essence that I hold today. And I believe that there is some sort of ingrained, you know, essence to each of us. That's what gives the uniqueness to it. Otherwise, I would see it as like boring. It would be robotic and machine-like. That's what's this whole IoT thing. That's what it makes it like. That's why people, I think, naturally are just going to want to break away anyways. Rebel in a sense, but not necessarily be an uprising. You know, just depends on how you look at those.
It's like that iPet Goat 2. Within it, you sort of see the idea that people...
I know that whole movie front to back, back and forth. I've watched hundreds of breakdowns on it. I mean, I know all 7 minutes and 37 seconds or whatever.
Well, that's once the demiurge leaves this, that dragon with the Ordo ab Cheo underneath the eyelid. Again, that's going back to that idea of the louche, which comes from the French word, which means to be blind in one eye. Again, that's found throughout the various demiurgic cults, from Atonism all the way to the Al-Masih al-Dajjal, to, the bust of Nefertiti. She was Atonistic as well. Also found within Odin, when he prostrated himself, or not prostrated himself, hung himself on the world tree, inverted. Blah, 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 blah. We see it everywhere. So you see it today as well. This, again, is a symbol of louche. That's this louche notion is, again, the demiurge as well is called the blind god. That's another epithet for him. So this idea is based around ignorance, right? This louche term, that people in ignorance produce copious amounts of this flux of energy, right? This fluctuating principle that maintains the eternality of this illusion. So I was going to say something else, and I've totally forgot my train of thought now. Sorry, I've totally forgot my train of thought, man.
Derailed.
Yeah. Oh yes. Absolutely. To know yourself. That is it. That's the essence of everything. Everything that else that happens in the world is a mere. It can be controlled by controlling yourself, right? And I don't mean controlling your body and controlling your mind. I mean literally controlling that which provides you the sense of self. If you understand that, and you understand how to not manipulate that, but to literally directly steer it, to be in tune with it in some degree, then you can begin to really put forth your will within this world and do what you must, not to survive, but to actually thrive, to also ensure other people gain that knowledge as well. So to do justice within this world, and to help them along the path of life as well. It's not just about helping yourself, of course, because we're all in this together. Really, when you boil it down, we're all sharing the same universal mind. We all come from the same wellspring of life. So therefore, by one essence of which we are, of the waters of life, by distilling or filtering or purifying one infinitesimal part of one infinitesimal drop of this wellspring of life, we don't purify the entire wellspring. So we have to maintain it in our minds that what we do, we have to also do for our fellow man, above all. So again, we have to help where we can help, and unfortunately, a lot of people are possessed by the demiurgic character. So really, if you help them, they may try to kill you, right? So you have to bear that in mind as well. Not everyone can be helped. You can only sow the seeds, and hopefully they bloom on their own. Most people are beyond. A lot of people are beyond help. We have to bear that in mind. to help them would hinder us. Yeah, for now, absolutely. Oh yes, that's your point. That was the point.
My point's that when any day of reckoning comes and the putrefaction is realized, you know, people will turn, because we do. It's a part of the natural flow of the balance. So, yeah, we're reaching an extreme. I think a lot of us, yeah, like we're reaching that extreme. That's where it's just like that rubber band effect or the theory. Like you're just gonna bounce off the wall and come right back the other way.
That's it. Basically, what I would say is, it desires an uprising. It desires this chaos. It literally is.
And I think that's to like essentially break that metaphorical bubble on this extreme we're going to. Like I think that's kind of like the demiurge's like concept to break out of this mirrored prison, in which, like, to me that's Pan's labyrinth. Pan is stuck in Pan's labyrinth of mirrors and smoke.
Yes, to establish destruction and chaos, to then use that to manifest itself within a world of its own. Oh yeah, yeah. The labyrinth's another. This is another concept. You have the Minotaur within the labyrinth as well. The Minotaur is the bestial nature, being again sort of stuck in this, being locked in this claustrophobic paradigm, right? You have to see it as the opportunity to learn that it is, and to, uh, in essence, grab the bull by the horns. Don't let the bull gore you to death with its horns. So, yes, that your idea you brought up there, um, in a way, potentially, yeah, not everyone will be able to. They're not going to be the sort of Noah that will enter the ark and survive this coming end of the age, right? Um, yes, yeah, potentially even ourselves, right?
A lot of people will die. Hmm. Yeah, our uh, statistics of survival, places we live and stuff are rather low.
Absolutely. But what we are doing is playing our part within this grand stage performance. This theater, right? And what we're doing is we are again sowing the seed of this gnosis, of that which will unshackle the human race, right? In time, it will provide enough residue, enough remnants, enough vapor that will survive at the top of the dome, at the heavens, right? That will survive the boiling of the seas, right? It will escape, ascend as vapor. It will cling to heaven, and then when the sea ceases boiling and it calms, it will then return back down to earth, right? And then the cycle will begin again. But most people will they will be the currency of chaos for this demiurge, right? Now, if you're aware of the illusion of the demiurge, and you act accordingly, right? I mean, you have the right way of living, right? The right way of carrying yourself in terms of morality, right? You may not survive it physically, but your spirit, your mind, that will survive, and that will leave a legacy, an imprint upon the remnant that comes after. And furthermore, as well, if you believe in it literally, then yes, you'll go to a higher ascended state, right? But yeah, it's most people will not survive this, unfortunately. You can give yourself better odds of survival. For example, getting the hell out of the West would be one. If you have the means to do so. This is the playground of destruction. Of course, we're in the midst of darkness. And as you can see, within the midst of darkness, we can see the light clearly. So in a way, that's in essence why we exist in the midst of darkness. It provides a sort of fast track route to understanding this wisdom, to understanding the gnosis, to piercing the veil and thus exposing the divine reality, no matter how terrifying it is. So, yeah, that's what I would say upon your point that I just remembered. I think I'm going to head off now, man. It's
No, you're good. I know it's late there. But all right, man. Really good talk. Sleep good. I'll talk to you tomorrow.